Over the last decade, Scottish primary teachers have been trained and supported to deliver modern foreign languages. As English primaries begin equipping their teachers to do the same, this programme visits two local authorities, Edinburgh and Aberdeenshire, and asks what can be learned from the Scottish experience. At Aberdeen University, teachers from the Shire and the city spend full days at the School of Education. Alison Harrell feels strongly that immersion is the way to convey language knowledge, hand in hand with pedagogical skills.
The teachers who train are in quite a unique position. They come along as learners of a foreign language, but simultaneously they are teachers, or they will be teachers of a foreign language.
Bien, je présente mon monstre qui s'appelle Marcel.
I think it's hugely important for them that they experience what it is like to be a young learner of the foreign language, and then to take that understanding and to use the language and the structures and to take those back into the classroom.
Oh, oui. Comme ça?
I think it's quite good to be in the receiving end and know exactly how your children would actually be at that particular time. You know, when you're faced with new language, it's exactly the same way as the children are faced with new language all the time.
We're preparing a game and a picture on a book. So we've got bilingual labels here.
They're all working teachers, but none of them are language specialists. So how does Alison see her job?
I'm trying to model the language, the strategies, the enthusiasm, the energy, the dispositions, by looking upon them as the children. I am modelling that as well. So I'm trying to model for them and to demonstrate how to bring this foreign language alive. It takes energy. It takes as well a relaxed and a comfortable and a secure learning environment.
County advisor Anne Moncur has been very supportive of the day release training programme.
It's expensive in terms of paying for the training, and it's expensive because for teachers to attend that training they have to come out of school and you have to put supply cover into the classes to cover the classes while they're away. But the benefits that are gained from that outweigh the costs. That's the decision we have come to. Initially, when the training was started, the Scottish Executive recommended 27 days. That's been cut down all over the place, and in fact I think Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City are about the only authorities left now that do this 20 days training.
In Edinburgh, supply cover for day release of teachers was seen to be too big a problem. Teachers here are more likely to be offered condensed after-hours or twilight sessions. Trainer David McAlpine sees the strain that this puts on the teachers.
Ideal would be to have them, in a sense, as we used to have them maybe 10 years ago, where we had them for full days out of the classroom and they had no worries about leaving classes or anything, where you could have immersion day after day after day, take them to France and all the rest of it. And that's the ideal thing. It's never ever going to happen. I mean, money is tight for everybody, I understand that, but to ask them to come 2 hours after a full day's work is asking an awful lot. It's not ideal, and credit to them, they come back week after week. I have to say they all work very, very hard and with great enjoyment, so I think that's the main thing.
So, who comes along to the training? It's a big commitment on both sides, and Development Officer Bethan Owen sees no point in press-ganging reluctant teachers.
It's entirely voluntary. I mean, it may well be that a head teacher needs that particular skill in the schools and so will promote it amongst the staff. It tends to be the teachers themselves that want to do it. I don't necessarily think that teachers that have gone through their initial training already should be made to teach a foreign language. Far from it, because you can't get an enthusiastic practitioner if you're being forced to do something that you're not comfortable or confident with. The teachers do have to put a fair amount of their own time and commitment into it, but they do get quite a lot out at the end. There are two specific sets of skills here. First, of course, there's the language base. Most of the students that come to us have some prior knowledge of the language, although there's a strong language component to the training. Just because you know a language doesn't mean you know how to teach it. There's a very particular methodology, and so a good part of the course is dedicated to a methodology for learning and teaching.
As with the Aberdeenshire teachers, the aim is to find ways of integrating the new language into the classroom as creatively as possible.
I am making a Easter card, and a lot of these activities are ones that you would teach normally in different, in English perhaps. So you can adapt the activity that you might use for a different subject perhaps in order to use it to teach French, because essentially you're wanting to convey the same types of instructions.
Definitely use all these ideas. I think it makes it fun for them, and they're kind of learning in a way that they're maybe not sure. They're using all the different colours and asking for all the different things in French. So.
With limited time, the lessons have to be tightly focused. There's a lot to take in.
We tell the teachers, our teachers here, that there are two levels of language. We are teaching them French for their own personal competence, and that's something they can take away. But that is not the language we expect the children to be able to produce. So there's French for the children, and French for the teachers, and French for the teachers to teach the children with.
The recreation commence à 10h30.
Working at two levels of language is complex enough for the teachers. David's reluctant to bring in explicit knowledge about language on top of that.
We do talk a lot about language awareness and transferable skills from one language to another and concepts, and I think that's true. How far you can make that conscious at primary level, I've not really made up my mind about, but certainly that these concerns do appear in national guidelines and so on. I think we've got so much to do just teaching the language and making it enjoyable that, on the factory floor, so to speak, at the moment, these more lofty concerns are perhaps of less priority to us. I shouldn't say that, but that's the way I feel about it.
The original aim of the national training programme for French was to give the teachers the confidence and the competence to teach a relatively limited amount of foreign language in a creative way.
So, is confidence in their teaching skills more important than linguistic competence?
I wouldn't like to say one is more important than the other. I would be very concerned if linguistically the teachers weren't able to provide an authentic role model for the children. Similarly, I would be very concerned that with the greatest linguistic competence available to some of the teachers, if they were not able to introduce and consolidate the language in a way which engaged the children and which made the foreign language come alive for the children.
Will MFL one day be part of every primary teacher's initial training? Beth and Owen has mixed feelings.
Ideally, I would like to see modern language as part of the core for initial teacher training, and I'd hope that we're moving along the path to that happening at some point in the future. I think there probably are concerns about recruitment of students to teacher training if modern languages were to be a requirement. There are also questions I would have thought about if you were bringing in students that had no background in languages, about where you find the time in the timetable to include a modern language for even just the basic training that it would require.
The Aberdeen training is nearly over. Will the teachers now be left to their own devices? Anne Moncur sees the value of online networking.
You have to give further training and you have to give support afterwards. The Scottish Executive, through Learning and Teaching Scotland, has been setting up something called the SSDN, which is the Scottish Schools Digital Network. The first curricular area to have been put on that is modern languages.
Scottish Silt at the University of Stirling. In-house specialist Ewan McIntosh explains the particular value of IT here.
Scotland is a small country, but it's spread out over an incredibly large area. And if you want to get the expert help, if you want to get access to expertise, you normally have to come to Glasgow, Stirling or Edinburgh. And we, with these websites, are being able to say to people, well, no, you don't. You can do it from your living room if you want to. The site's designed around different uses and different ways of teaching. We've got a section for that traditional teacher who wants to have stuff off the shelf, or for the teacher that's pushed for time and needs to have something ready for a couple of hours' time or for Monday morning. The site is also there for those who are designing policies in schools, for their department. There's no such thing as a typical teacher in Scotland, because if you teach in a school where you've got 20 pupils in total, you're working in a very different way from a teacher in an inner city school who's got 30 kids in a class 6 or 7 or 8 times a day. And trying to create something for one teacher would never work. We have to create stuff for an infinite number of different types of teacher.
Kate Miller's nearly finished Alison's training course. But she works with one other teacher in a tiny rural school and lives 40 miles from Aberdeen. Professional life can feel pretty isolated. But now she's getting online. Ewan's site is a way of reinforcing her training and networking with other teachers in rural and urban schools across Scotland.
It is difficult when you're out in the country to have contact with as many teachers as you would like. So I think this is a way of doing it, actually, that I hadn't really thought about, but I'm really happy that I found this site, and I'm sure there are other sites too that are just as helpful.
Bonjour Victor. 5, 6, allez plus vite.
The Scottish experience has been diverse, and England's teachers now face their own mix of scenarios in turn. How should they be equipped to cope?
You have to have a really systematic and thorough training program in place. You can't do it piecemeal. But basically, the success does not depend so much on their competence or their super competence in the language as are they good teachers. Do they handle their kids well? Do they motivate? Do they excite the kids? Do they make the kids enjoy it? That's the main thing.
Scotland has gone into this really with a blank page to begin with, and have learnt as they've gone on, and the goalposts have changed slightly and expectations have changed slightly over the years, and hopefully we've learnt a lot from that. I think the English system is now in an enviable position of being able to benefit from the years that we've spent, developing this whole thing. As a primary teacher, you have to teach every subject, and you have to research all those subjects to do. In a lot of areas, you're going to be 1-2 steps ahead of the children. You can't be an expert in every field. With modern languages, it needs to be a little bit more than 1 or 2 steps. But at the same time, you don't need to be a linguist to do that. If you've got some knowledge of the language, whether it be French or German, you can learn the particular language that you need for delivering this with the right training.